Well, the deadline has come and gone, but it appears as though the Forever Canadian petition campaign has not just exceeded its threshold, but I think more than exceeded expectations. And we'll see where this all goes from here. But joining us to talk about the petition drive, this campaign, where everything does indeed go from here. Very pleased to welcome back to the program here Thomas Lukaszuk, of course, former MLA and cabinet minister, the founder of Forever Canadian. Again, the website is forever-canadian.ca. Thomas, well, congratulations, I guess, but thank you so much for joining us here.
Well, thank you for having me, Rob. I appreciate it.
Okay, so as mentioned, there was this threshold. Again, it's the old threshold under Alberta's petition law. So it was just under 300,000 signatures your group needed to gather based on your counts. And obviously, this all needs to be verified. But what's the number that you believe you reached here?
We approached 460,000 signatures the moment we actually handed it in. So yes, enormous number of signatures, nearly 500,000 of electors. That, just to put in perspective, that's about 25% of all the people that voted in the last election. So it's a pretty good threshold.
And again, just in case people aren't familiar with this process, this involved obviously getting out into the public. People had to sign these in person. There's all kinds of paperwork involved in this. I mean, it's boxes and boxes upon boxes that now have to go to Elections Alberta.
Yes, 62 boxes. So, if this was done online, we would have received a higher number of signatures. Probably you can double that at least. But this was pen and paper. Nearly 6,000 volunteers across the province every day collecting signatures. Quite an astonishing task to accomplish for those volunteers. But those boxes, 62 boxes, were delivered to Elections Alberta, containing all the signatures. Now, the commissioner hired a large number of Albertans who will be scrutinizing those signatures, making sure that they are electors, that everything is filled out properly. And he may discount some number of signatures, who knows? But we have enough of a threshold not to be concerned overly over that.
Mhm. Right, which was part of the goal, right? You didn't want to just
That's
get to
right.
300,000 and maybe some signatures get thrown out or something. But it sounds like this process, we're not going to know, I guess, for sure until what, January, right?
Well, the commissioner has about 60 days to validate the petition, but I don't think he will take that long. Again, particularly because of the margin, but also he has other petitions on his hands now. We started something
Right.
here, so his office is preoccupied with two other petitions. I'm sure there will be more, so I think he will do it as expediently as he possibly can and as accurately as he possibly can.
Looking back at, the decision to launch this campaign, kind of what prompted this on your part and just everything that went into this sort of uncharted territory. No one had done this before. And just as you say, all the logistics, all the volunteers, everything that had to go into this. But where did this come from in the first place?
Well, when I started noticing that, we always have had some kind of a movement for separation, all the way from Premier Lougheed till now, and it would sort of rise and wane depending on the prices of oil or pipeline construction or something like this. But when I started noticing, for the first time in the history of our country, a premier starting to tilt the field in favor of separatism, that's when I decided that, somebody has to step in. When the premier amended the Citizens Initiative Act and lowered the threshold for separatists to only 172,000 signatures, extended the time period from 90 to 120 days, and basically took all the restrictions off of fundraising. And then when I learned that there is a deal that she will proclaim these new rules on July 4th, the American Independence Day, I knew something needs to be done immediately. And I had confidence in Albertans that I can actually get the signatures under the old rules, the more strenuous pathway. But that's what I did, and in essence, it was the right thing to do.
And there was some urgency to it, knowing that the separatist side was trying to organize their own petition campaign because under the rules, getting there first is pretty significant.
It is. There cannot be two competing petitions at the same time. So by filing my first, even though under the less advantaged position of the old rules, was really critical, because then my petition, our question, would go forward as opposed to the separatists one. Having said that, they got stuck in court anyhow because their question is considered to be perhaps unconstitutional. The courts will decide, but that will be a lengthy process.
The response to this has been quite something. Obviously, the numbers speak for themselves, but even just to see, I know in recent weeks, I mean, Peter Guthrie, of course, former UCP cabinet minister who had been a supporter of Danielle Smith, he proudly signed this petition. I know Ed Stelmach was involved in this campaign. So it really kind of transcended, politics in a lot of ways, or at least the political aisle, didn't it?
In every way you can possibly think of, Rob, our organizing committee had literally representatives of all political parties, not only provincial but federal ones too. We had former organizers of the Reform Party and members of Parliament and liberals and conservatives and NDPers and Alberta Party, and the list sort of goes on and on. But most of the people actually who were activated by this movement were people who were not politically active. They were engaged by voting, but not members of any political parties, and never actually imagined being part of a campaign. So this wasn't really a political campaign. This was a social uprising, of a sense, where people started to reclaim and find their own voice. Particularly in rural Alberta, they were somewhat subdued into silence by sort of more vocal, aggressive members of the community, and they thought actually that they were the minority, and now they came to realize that they aren't the minority. They were just silent. They found their voice. They signed the petition. They got to know each other. A lot of friendships have been formed. So many refer to it as a movement or as a community, but it definitely was a healing process because neighbors who didn't trust other neighbors all of a sudden got to know each other. We're working together on this petition, signing the petition. After many years of divisiveness in this province, a lot of it purposefully created. This was a somewhat of a healing process, and I hope now that the premier does the right thing and allows this healing to continue, as opposed to call a referendum and again divide us again.
We'll talk about next steps and what the Premier can or should do here. Just in terms of the movement itself, you wrote an op-ed a couple of weeks ago just talking about how people seem to be yearning for something positive in politics, right? That maybe there's been too much negativity in politics. This gave something people could really latch on to, feel that positivity, almost that hope.
Well, it showed that politics and campaigns can be done around a positive issue about something that you believe in as opposed to reject. It showed that it can be nonpartisan, that you and I may vote for different political parties, but on core values, we're the same. We're proud Canadians, proud Albertans, and we want this place to be as good as it possibly can be for everybody. So it rejected those old division lines. And I'm starting to notice this as I converse now with literally tens of thousands of people myself, that people are getting tired of this, of partisanship, and particularly this sort of left and right division. And they're asking and the reason they joined this was because they want something pragmatic. They don't care where it comes from, as long as it's good, as it's positive, as constructive. And they don't want to view politics anymore through the prism of what is left and what is right. But hope was the biggest message. Thank you for giving us our voice back, and thank you for giving us hope. Because a lot of people even tuned out of news. They don't want to see what's going on around the world because it's all negative, and this was something positive. And I'm glad to have been able to share that with everybody.
At the same time, I mean, this isn't necessarily meant as an endorsement of the state of relations with Ottawa or an endorsement
No,
of federal policies or anything. And obviously, we can have disagreements with the federal government. We can have conversations about provincial responsibility and what's good and bad policy. How do you sort of separate all of that in this conversation?
so that's right. I'm hoping to meet with our prime minister soon, and to discuss that. Just because we got 500,000 nearly signatures doesn't mean that everything is perfect. Frankly, it never has been perfect. When I was in government, I was there under liberal and conservative federal government, and we always had differences with both. That's who we are. That's what Canada is all about, and that's what makes us so great, I think, and makes us a G7 country. We always are in flux. We negotiate things, but we have mechanisms for it, and we do it according to certain rules without threatening separatism. Um, so the message will be things aren't perfect. Albertans are not 100% happy with the relationship that they have with Ottawa and with other provinces. And we need to negotiate those differences, but not using separatism as a threat. Uh, it's economically it's suicidal. As we're arguing that we should be more prosperous, the whole threat of separatism is really undermining investor confidence in this province and in this country. It shows cracks that others are exploiting for their political gain abroad. It's simply not a wise thing to do.
In terms of what happens next, and one aspect to this whole campaign that maybe people don't fully understand is the type of question that you drafted under this legislation and the different options that the premier has. This doesn't necessarily have to mean a referendum. In fact, you've been pretty clear that this shouldn't mean a referendum.
Correct. So that's why I chose a different pathway from separatists. Separatists filed under the constitutional clause, which would give premier or government no choice. There would have to be a referendum that would be binding on the government. Again, that's overreach. We don't need that. We know where most Albertans are. So my pathway creates an extra step. It gives the premier, the government, the opportunity to do what I consider to be the right thing to do. So the premier, once she receives this petition certified, she never, by the way, gets to see any signatures. She just gets a certificate. Signatures get destroyed like ballots. Once she gets the certificate, she will strike a committee. But majority of the members of that committee will be her caucus UCP members. So basically, she will tell the committee to give her advice that she really wants to receive. And that committee will give her two options. One is to bring this question to the legislature and have our MLAs vote on it. And if it passes, which I have no doubt it would overwhelmingly pass, that would become government policy. And this talk of separatism would be done and over with, and government would be able to focus on other important issues of the day. And we know that there are many of them right now. Or Premier can choose the wrong thing to do, maybe more politically expedient for her, but definitely the wrong thing to do for Albertans and for our economy. And that is to call a referendum, either a standalone referendum or with the next election, which would again divide Albertans against Albertans, would create this uncertainty because we would have a massive campaign for at least probably 6 months. Yes, no campaign like they had in Quebec. And we know what happens to investment then. When we all know when 500,000 people sign a petition in less than 90 days, when all polling shows that more than 80% of Albertans want nothing to do with separatism, it would be an unconscionable thing to do. But the ball is in the premier's court. She can do whichever she wishes.
But I guess she has to choose a path. Like she can't ignore this, right?
No, she cannot ignore this. She has to act on it either way, before or at the next election. And, from a political perspective, I think any premier would be unwise to ignore 500,000 Albertans from the entire province. What's interesting here, Rob, is that, and I will be pulling out more statistics because this campaign was very much IT/AI based. Interestingly enough, I believe that on per capita basis, we collected as many signatures in rural Alberta as we did in urban Alberta. So the same percentage of residents signed this petition. So there is no urban-rural divide when it comes to our wanting to stay in Canada and being patriotic.
I don't imagine you've spoken with the premier at all.
No. The premier has made comments about this petition, but she and I are not conversing at all.
Do you foresee the possibility? I mean, she would still have to do something, I guess, at some point. But what about a snap election to sort of avoid making a tough decision?
Well, no, she has to call a referendum on or before the next election. So if she calls a snap election, then this referendum will be part of that snap election. I certainly, hope she does the right thing. And let's, we elect MLAs to make difficult decisions. This isn't a particularly difficult decision when, this petition and polling otherwise shows you where you're at. Have a vote in the legislature and let's put this separatist talk to bed once and for all. And then let's focus on curing some of the issues, because I don't dismiss the fact that there are angry Albertans who maybe have been driven to the point of wanting to separate because certain issues bother them so much. Now, I had the opportunity to speak to many of them as I was traveling in that Unity bus. Put on over 7,000 kilometers, believe it or not, in a month and a half. And some of their issues are valid. But rather nearly impossible to solve because Harper had the same issues he couldn't solve either. The number of seats that Alberta has in the House of Commons. Well, we can add seats to Alberta, but that means opening up the Constitution, and then other provinces will have their asks too. So sometimes you better not opening that can of worms. Maybe electoral reform is the way to go. If the equalization formula needs to be looked at, let's take a look at it. But again, be careful what you ask for, because other provinces will have their asks too. So sometimes opening up the Constitution is a risk that we would take. And those are the discussions we need to have, and there are mechanisms for these discussions, and nobody dismisses any of the legitimate complaints that Albertans have. But unfortunately, a lot of this was charged by emotion and purposeful disinformation, backed by massive dollars. Rob, I don't know where these dollars are coming from. But when I have a farmer telling me that he doesn't need access to Tidewater because he will be flying his grain out of Alberta, even me, a city slicker, I know that there's zero possibility, physically impossible. And people are starting to buy into these mythologies, what an oasis this country of Alberta would be if they could only be a separate country. And we need to engage with those people into a conversation as well, and somehow convey the message that it just doesn't add up. Facts don't support that theory. Somebody's playing you, and is capitalizing on your dissatisfaction for some other gain.
Now, and again, as you mentioned, the rules are pretty clear that there can really only be one petition on a certain issue. So, I mean, as you say, the ball's in the Premier's court in terms of the decision she makes. But once this is certified, regardless of her decision, that closes the door on any other petition around this question, doesn't it?
That is correct. It closes the door. But if she decides to go the referendum path, we're ready. One of the reasons why it was also important to go first is to make sure that we just don't stand on sidelines, watch others organize. But now we have 500,000 signatories. We have 6,000 full-time canvassers, and that's what Forever Canadian is all about. It has only one purpose: to make sure that Albertans remain in Canada.
What about your own future? I mean, as we mentioned, you were previously in politics, of course, for quite some time. You've been away for a while. I mean, is this maybe for you an avenue back into politics? I know we mentioned Peter Guthrie, potentially the rebirth of the PC party. Where do you see your future from here?
This has never been part of the calculation. So I honestly haven't given this a lot of thought. I was simply focused on this one task. Although I have to, tell you that I'm asked that question a lot now. I never thought politics would be again in my future. I'm quite happy being out of politics and being a little bit of an armchair critic and organizing these campaigns like this one or the Ukraine one a few years ago. I don't know. I really honestly have to tell you, I don't know. I never thought I would return to politics. It's once you've done it for as long as I have, almost 15 years, but never say never. I am not a member of any political party in Canada. I haven't been for now nearly 10 years. I don't have a political home right now in Alberta because even though I lent my vote once to NDP, I'm not a NDPer, nor am I definitely a UCPer. So I'm not sure, what formations there will be into the future, but I'm not also involved with this movement of recreating the PC party. I simply haven't had time to even pay any attention to that.
All right. Well, an opportunity to take a deep breath here. We'll await to the final word from Elections Alberta, and I guess see what the Premier decides to do. So again, Forever-Canadian is the website. Thomas Lukaszuk, again, congrats, and thank you so much for joining us here.
Rob, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Hey, folks, thanks for watching and listening. You can find us at robbreakenridge.ca. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button below and stay connected with The Rob Breakenridge Show.